You're watching the 420 Pace Network, found at 420radio.ca and paceradio.net.
Deadly free and smoking on them. And me got some cushion on my back.
So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
You like music, you like weed, well, we gonna be good friends indeed. This is how much I like more than smoking trees. They'll make you dance the do-si-do and teach you how the chiba grows. Smoke a bowl on the 420 radio show. On Lifestyle Radio.
All right, sing it, guys. Marcel's not here yet. He will be in. Hi, this is the 420 Radio Show. We are live at 420radio.ca and lifestyleradio.net. I'm gonna, Lori's here and Ross is here and Chris is here. Marcel will be in a few minutes. And the one, the only gentleman that everybody likes to call Dr. Bob, Dr. Robert Melamede is here with us. Hello, Dr. Bob. How are you?
Hello there.
It's a pleasure to hear your voice again. Sir, you have one of the most kindest voices I've ever heard speak.
I think a lot of people would disagree with that, especially my 3 ex-wives.
Oh, well, you know, when you're talking cannabinoids and cannabinoidal medicine, it's like music. It really is. And we've all been very, very excited about this week, having a chat with you. I thought what I'd like to do is give you a minute to tell people who may not know who you are and why you're here.
Well, that's a tough question. Who am I and why am I here?
I have a tougher one for you later.
Figure that out. but actually, what I'm going to talk about will explain all of that from the point of view of what I really am. But for just the trivial sake, I'm retired Ph.D. in molecular genetics and biochemistry. And what I really am is an old hippie that loves to get stoned. And I'm 69 years old now. I've been smoking and using cannabis for about 53 years pretty regularly, lately, and for the past number of years, constantly, basically. I like to eat it. So what I've done for my whole life is try to understand what life is. And thankfully, from my perspective, I think that I now understand what life is, and that's what I try to share with people, because once you understand what's really going on from the point of view of physics, in other words, I can describe physical phenomena that will take us up to the point where we understand what life is and how it works, and at that point we can understand the very special, unique role of the endocannabinoid system in the life of all vertebrates, and especially man, and how that's going to contribute and how it has contributed to us being here, but how it's going to contribute to where we're going. So that's it in a nutshell. I was the chairman of the bio department at the University of Colorado, and before that I was research professor, assistant professor at University of Vermont and New York Medical College. So I was a lab geek for many, many years. I love lab experiments, and
I think it's safe. I think it's safe to say you know your shit, right?
I know a bit of science. I must say that I'm kind of mentally ill. What I do is I sit around stoned and read all the time.
I guess I do that too. I read the news all day. I sit here and I post news all day, so I'm reading all day. And I'm dyslexic.
Well, I'm ADD, so I watch television, old westerns,
ADHD here.
And everything else while I do all my work.
Netflix and Showbox for me. I have ADHD. I'm on disability for it, so we're totally on the same wavelength.
Oh, I'm very ADHD. I tell you, it's difficult often for me to read one sentence.
Well, since we've brought up the ADHD, I know the guys will want to talk to you too, but they can shut up. I've been here longer. Since you brought up the ADHD, I have severe ADHD. I talk about it all the time. My life has been totally impacted by it. I'm on disability for it. I have a hard time I have social phobias before it. I've had Dr. Behrman on the show. David Behrman was on the show, and he enlightened us onto why it works from a brain point of view. But I've always been interested in that whole, when you give a hyperactive person Ritalin, it calms them down. It works the same way, cannabis, for me anyways. The sativa does one thing and the indica will do another, but it's switched with some people. Can you explain why?
Yeah. I can't explain that all, but I can give you some general ideas.
Okay.
Actually, it's better if I talk about what life is first, because then the answer that I would give you would be more meaningful, because everything that I understand about biology and health springs forth from this underlying understanding of what life is.
You have the floor, sir. You go ahead.
Oh, I can go on forever. So shut me up whenever you want me to. Whenever you want to.
We're not going to shut you up.
So, I studied molecular biology. I was still in undergraduate school when the genetic code was discovered back in the 60s.
Wow.
I was in undergraduate school back then as well. And what I searched for after learning a lot about molecular biology, at that time relatively simple compared to what we know now, but at that point the big discovery was what's called irreverently called the Holy Trinity: DNA, RNA, and protein synthesis. And it linked all of those together for all living forms. By discovering the code, you knew how the linear sequence of DNA could become the linear sequence of amino acids, which make proteins, okay? So I took a course in thermodynamics, trying to understand what made life. I mean, you can understand that we have DNA and genetics and all of that, but how did that come about? Where did that come from? So I took a course in thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is a branch of physical chemistry, and thermo, heat, energy, dynamics, flow. So flowing energy. Unfortunately, the classical thermodynamics is not about flowing energy. And it's about what's called equilibrium conditions. Conditions when things are already done, so they're not going to do anything else. So how can you look at life from that perspective? And in fact, from that perspective, life is statistically impossible. So that was kind of confusing and frustrating, especially since I'm a mathematical moron, and that course tormented the hell out of me because I'm a mathematical moron. However, along the way, I discovered the work of Ilya Prigogine, who got the Nobel Prize in 1977 for creating a new field of physics called far from equilibrium thermodynamics. And that is, in fact, what we are. We are far from equilibrium. You want to get closer to equilibrium, get sick and die. Or, wrap yourself up in a plastic bag and leave yourself rotting for 1 million years, and eventually nothing anymore will happen. So the difference between these two forms of physics, one says life is impossible, and the other basically says life must happen. So, of course, that makes a lot more sense. However, it wasn't for many years that Prigogine really kind of reached the apex of his understanding. And that came out in a book called The End of Certainty. And it's a very, very profound book. It's only, it's a short book, but my God, is it dense with, he's one of the smartest people that ever lived. No question about that. And what it basically tells you is that time is this constant change that only occurs when you're not at equilibrium. If you're at equilibrium, everything is randomized, and you can't tell. There is no time because there's no change. So with that perspective, we go back. We have a Big Bang. We don't have to worry about where the Big Bang came from or what's going on there. What we know is that we have this expanding universe, and that as things cooled and planets formed and they cooled, that at some point on our planet, life emerged. So that's where I would like to really now focus on what's going on. I'd like to give you a whole evolutionary history lesson.
Please do.
As to, pardon me?
Please do, but I have one question first. Before you get,
yes.
Do you mind if we smoke pot while you're speaking?
Yeah, you got to pass it to me and
All
figure
right.
out how to do that.
All right.
Okay, I don't smoke very much. I'm an eater. I start my day by eating about 100 milligrams of high-quality oil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I repeat that at least one more time during the day.
Wow.
I've got a lot of arthritic conditions, and when you understand what I'm talking about in this discussion today, you'll understand why I do that. Cannabis, the quick summary, the quick answer is that cannabis is an essential nutrient for modern man. Forget this drug bullshit. Yeah. It's a nutrient that if you want to live a healthy, long life, you've got to consume it regularly, period. So what I'd like to do now is explain why that's the case.
Okay,
all right?
Please do, please.
So, go ahead, sorry.
No, please continue. That's all I said.
Oh, okay. Sometimes these delays, scramble my brain a little.
Yeah, mine too.
All right, so about 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth condensed out of basically stardust, and it has a very hot core, so there's energy there, and it's constantly bombarded by sunlight, as well as all the electromagnetic radiation that we're constantly bathed in, as we move through the Milky Way, et cetera, et cetera. So what Prigogine discovered are these things called dissipative structures. And it's very important for us to understand what that is, because we are all dissipative structures. So it'd be nice to know what we are. And what it basically is saying is that we extract information and energy from our surroundings, and we use that energy to maintain our integrity. And we get rid of our waste to the environment. And from a scientific point of view, what that's saying is that the entropy of the universe increases by us actually forming a collection of molecules in which information is increased. Information is the opposite of entropy. And there's this law in the basic law of the way things work called the second law of thermodynamics that says entropy must increase. All right? Which is disorder. So that always led to the paradox. How are we here? How is life here if it's organization and if the natural tendency of the universe is to go to disorder? And what Prigogine showed is that as long as you have flowing energy, it can actually organize mass, which is then the mass is becoming more negative entropic. It's becoming organized. So this now adds a new twist to what everybody thought. See, before you thought, if I took all the molecules that made me up, for example, and I disassociated them so that they were individual molecules and atoms, and I put them in a big dye tumbler, and I threw out that dye tumbler, what's the likelihood of me coming out? Essentially zero. But I'm here. So how did I get here? So what Prigogine discovered by creating the physics and the supporting math for verifying observations that had been previously poo-pooed because it didn't make sense from the standard view. And what these were special chemical reactions that, in particular, there's one reaction where electrons flow from where they don't want to be to where they want to be. So now you have flow. It's basically electricity, right? Electrons flowing. So you have one chemical that has a lot of them and wants to get rid of them, and you have other chemicals that would like to have more, and as soon as you provide the appropriate channels, those electrons can flow and you can convert things, okay? So what Prigogine showed is that there are a number of circumstances where flowing energy organizers matter. And that's what we are. You see, as soon as you stop the flow of a living system, the living system becomes a dead system. If we stop eating, we stop shitting and pissing, we stop breathing, we are stopping the flow that maintains our organization. Now, I'm going to give you a very simple example of that in a different context, because flowing energy can take on many different forms. And flowing electrons is exactly what powers life, but there are other examples that we're all familiar with, and yet we don't think about them in the context that I'm trying to describe, because we haven't been educated that way, because far from equilibrium thermodynamics, when it's taught, is typically in advanced physics courses and graduate courses, and it should be taught in kindergarten by giving people demonstrations of things so that they understand that what I'm going to describe to you is very special. Now, I'm going to give you a very simple explanation. We've all pulled the plug in our bathtub or flushed our toilet. What do you see? You see a whirlpool that forms. Well, that's a structure. The molecules are no longer random. So they're organized. And what's driving that organization is gravity. And once the toilet reaches the bottom, the water reaches the bottom, that spiral disappears. It's the same thing that accounts for tornadoes or hurricane weather patterns. When you look at those patterns, what you're seeing is a structure that's dependent on the flow of the wind and the heat to generate that structure, okay? So in that case, gravity or heat can be generating flow-dependent structures. In our case, it's the flow of electrons from chemicals that want to get rid of them, in particular hydrocarbons, the carbohydrates that we eat, the protein that we eat, the fats. They all are made out of carbon and hydrogen molecules. And in order to add those hydrogens onto the carbon, it requires energy. And that energy comes from the sunlight. And before life formed, what it did was it powered chemical reactions that formed these heterogeneities, these structures in liquids. You know, if you just pour a liquid and let it sit there, you're never going to see a whirlpool form. But as soon as you allow gravity to act on it, you can see the whirlpool forming. Okay, so flowing energy is the critical deal here. And so once life first emerged, well, let's go back. Before life emerged, you had these inorganic, meaning pre-life, chemical reactions that were forming in the prebiotic soup, the ocean. And as time went on, you had areas where the things were concentrated, and you had things coming and going, basically. Think of, you know, the sunlight's hitting it. We have daylight cycles, so you're going to change you're going to have heat gradients forming. All of these things lead to these concentrations that can eventually form these flow-dependent structures. So you had now the ability to generate prebiotic chemical organization before there was ever any life. And as that process continued, because the earth has kept getting hit by more sunlight, and you had the warmth of the earth, and you had different chemistry providing sources of flow. Eventually, things got complicated enough that out popped life. And then the same process kept happening. Life keeps taking in more energy, creating more complexity, because what's really going on with all living systems is they're trying to survive. Well, you're trying to survive, but think about your life. Every instant is different, which means that you've got to constantly change to be alive. And what I'm trying to get at here is that change is a constant occurrence. As the universe unfolds, as the biochemistry and chemistry on the planet continues to evolve, powered by the sunlight, basically. And as a result, we keep having instabilities in this big chemistry set called the planet Earth. And those instabilities generate higher forms of organization. In the same way that life formed, according to what I'm telling you, which nobody else will tell you, as this chemistry keeps flowing, it gets agitated, and so much energy flows that the only solution is to get more organized and create a new regime. It's a non-linear change. You go from nothing to something in terms of organization. Okay, so the first organisms were bacteria. They were called prokaryotes because they had DNA, but they didn't have nucleus and a lot of other of the complexity that characterizes our cells, which are called eukaryotic cells. Eukaryote meaning true chromosome, as opposed to prokaryotic meaning early chromosome, essentially. Okay, so for 1 billion years, sunlight and the chemistry from the heat of the earth allowed those microorganisms to reproduce and to thrive. But you got to look at what was going on back then. First of all, until they appeared, there was no organic matter. And, excuse me, as they lived and died, what you now did was you generated all of these hydrocarbon corpses from all 1 billion years of dying bacteria. And these bacteria, as they were using the sunlight to make themselves as a byproduct, as a waste product, they made something rather important for us, oxygen. And what that did was it ultimately changed the entire atmosphere of the planet, from one that had virtually no oxygen to one that had a lot of oxygen. So on the one hand, we now had oxygen, and on the other hand, we had hydrocarbons, where sunlight was used to force the hydrogen onto the carbon. So that means energy was in there. And now now you can burn that. All right? So that's how life evolved to a higher complexity to generate the kinds of cells that form us. So the first eukaryotic cells that were formed were protozoa. You know, amoeba and paramecium that you all saw in high school when you looked under the microscope. And those cells did not have endocannabinoid receptors. They didn't have a CB1 receptor or a CB2 receptor or a lot of the other receptors, but they did have receptors, so they have to communicate with their environment, because their environment is what keeps them alive. As you suck negative entropy, organization, and chemical potential out of your surroundings. So they kept getting more complicated as well. And we went from protozoa to sponges, which are pretty unsophisticated. A sponge is not very smart, you know. It doesn't really have a nervous system or a brain. It's got some cells that start to take on those functions. So look for a second at what your nervous system does. It takes information from outside of you, and it brings that information into you. Sight, sound, smells, taste, all of those things are regulated and brought into the system, the collection of molecules that is you. And on the other hand, your immune system is monitoring all the mass that comes into the system. Those are the only things that can come in, energy or mass, right? So your nervous system deals with the energy, and your immune system deals with the mass, because you're eating things from outside, and you've got to be able to bring them into you in a way that's safe and harmonious. So if you look, for example, in humans, our gut is where 70% of our immune system is, because that's where you're taking in all that mass. But we're also taking it in through our lungs and through our skin. So we have a lot of monitoring devices there to make sure that we deal with the things that are coming in such a way that they don't kill us. So these prokaryotes evolved into multicellular organisms that kept getting more complex over time. And it's very important to understand what evolution selects for. It selects for survivability. It selects for adaptation. It doesn't select for strength. It doesn't select for intelligence. It selects for the ability to adapt so you can survive, period. So organisms kept getting more complex, but they had a limit in terms of how much they could adapt. And it was at that point that the chemistry set got complicated enough that before you have a major change in these far from equilibrium phase changes, as they're called, the system itself starts to go crazy. It's like what's happening today with our politics, with our weather, with our banking, with our finances, with our economies. All of these things that you're seeing today around us are the same kinds of things that always happen, because they're the product of this continuous unfolding. We are in a big chemistry set. It's called the planet Earth and the biosphere. It's a combination of the inorganic, the geosphere, along with the biosphere, and how they interact for the life to continuously survive. So what happened with the emergence of the vertebrates, see, these other organisms, your insects and your worms and your lobsters, they don't have the level of adaptability that we do. And our lineage emerged from when a new level of adaptability occurred. And that's when the vertebrates were formed. And quite amazing and mind-boggling is the following truth. Along with their emergence, also for the first time, you had a cannabinoid receptor. You had the CB1 receptor on nervous cells. Now remember, those protozoa had the biochemistry that produced endocannabinoids. You had anandamide in a protozoa, which is anandamide is one of your main endocannabinoids. But it didn't have receptors because they were part of these flowing biochemical structures that had not yet evolved the sophistication of communicating into a more complicated scenario, that of the vertebrate. So let me explain now what really is going on, because it's so simple. You see, it's just people don't understand because nobody says it other than me. So what happened is, think about your brain, think about your head. What's the big characteristic? If you put your hand on your head, what are you feeling? Heat. You're always going to be hot. Your head is the hottest part of your body, and your neck, right? They're always giving off a lot of heat. Why is that?
And that's why
your brain is.
That's where you experience most of your pain as well, right?
Well, yeah, but the point here is that flowing energy organizes matter. Your brain is the most complicated piece of biology on the planet.
Yes.
So it's got a tremendous amount of organization. It requires a tremendous amount of energy to maintain that. Because if we cut off your food supply and you die, your brain is going to decrease its complexity until it stops everything, right? So what we want to do is maintain our distance from equilibrium. We want to be charged up with life. And we want to be able to continuously adapt to our environment so that we, as a living entity, can continue to survive and thrive and grow. And with the emergence of that CB1 receptor, something very, very special happened. Again, this is only from my perspective. Everybody else will tell you that I'm nuts, but I can prove it all. And they don't even talk to me about it because their heads are so far embedded in their asses that they can't see any light.
There you go.
And I'm talking about doctors and professional scientists.
Hello. Is there anybody out there?
So what's going on is this. You couldn't develop a complicated brain with the existing biochemical machinery of the invertebrates because we generate energy in different ways. And the most efficient way that we generate energy happens to also be the most dangerous. So we have a series of chemical reactions within our mitochondria known as the electron transport system. And what that is a way of taking these electrons that are coming from the reduced hydrocarbons, the food that we eat, and passing them through the complexity of biology until they have no more energy. And what do we put out? CO2 and water. Right? That's what you're breathing out, and we get rid of our water with our urine and along with our ammonium compounds, etc. And your feces is basically 80-90% bacteria. We actually have more bacteria living on us and within that tube of our digestive system because they're much smaller cells. Remember, the prokaryotes are not as complicated. We actually have more bacteria living on us and part of us than we have our own cells. How's that for bizarreness, right? We tend to, it points up the stupidity.
That's scary,
of
actually.
sterile.
That's scary.
Well, no, it's not scary because we need them.
Oh, okay. So then it's not scary then. It sounds scary.
No, it's
though.
all symbiotic. Everything has to live in harmony with everything else so that everything keeps flowing.
Yes. Okay. I get you.
All right? And the bacteria in your gut regulate your state of health to a tremendous degree now. It's found more and more because the right bacteria live in harmony with you and the wrong bacteria don't.
Yeah,
and then they cause inflammation, and you get all sorts of illnesses.
That was the scary part for me.
We have to live in harmony with our environment, and what you want. See that everything is so stupid because everything is driven by marketing. So every time some asshole comes up with an idea that might sell something more, the morons go and peddle shit, and we, the blind sheeple, go and buy the crap.
Yeah.
Let me give you a prime example, and the significance of this will become clearer later on.
Okay.
Today, what do we see as one of our major causes of health, disease, lack of health, is what's called metabolic syndrome. The overweight, the diabetes, the heart disease, all of these come from metabolic syndrome. Well, what is that? It's that we're eating the wrong foods, and we're making too many free radicals. And it turns out that it's because we're eating too many sugars. So what has occurred over the past decades, peddled by the government and all the wise nutritionists and all the other morons, fat-free diets. Well, when you're on a fat-free diet, you're not burning any fat, you're only burning carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are very much enjoyed by this very efficient but dangerous pathway that I'm describing to you. The electron transport system that efficiently makes ATP. We break down most of our stuff ultimately to glucose, and then we funnel that glucose through a variety of pathways ultimately to make ATP, which is kind of like the dollar bill of biology. It's used for everything. It's the energy source. Just the way a dollar can get you anything, ATP can get you anything, all right? So where are we here? We have living systems. We're making waste, which in a case of humans is we're eating hydrocarbons. Just the way you burn coal and gas, we eat our food, which are hydrocarbons, be they proteins, fats, or carbohydrates. They're still all hydrocarbons. And we burn them down to CO2 and water. And at that point, we've taken everything out of those molecules because you can't do very much with CO2 and water without putting more energy back in. Matter of fact, we use CO2 and water as a fire extinguisher because it doesn't burn anymore. It's already lost its energy, okay? So where I'm going with this is the following. The CB1 receptor that gets you stoned has a very unique role in modulating energy flow in nerve cells. And what it basically does is it fine-tunes that efficient energy-producing machinery so that you can stay in the efficient mode longer than would otherwise be possible. What determines possibility is how many free radicals are being made.
Now, is it like a battery?
Back up again.
Like a battery kind of thing? Like a battery?
Well, a battery is the energy flow, period. Think of the charged battery as you eating your food.
Okay.
And the discharged battery is when you're spitting out your hydrocarbons, your CO2 rather, and your water.
Your spent energy, yeah. Yep.
So that's discharging your battery. By you being alive, you're discharging your battery.
Wow.
And there are two components to that. One is your physical self. You got muscles and bones and all of that. But the other is the fact that you're flow dependent. And all of your chemistry is constantly flowing. And if it's not flowing harmoniously, you're making free radicals and you're aging yourself. So you reduce aging by having harmonious flow and reducing free radical production. Now I'm going to tell you something that's mind-blowing. But this is
my
very
mind's
key to
already
understand
blown,
this.
man.
Mine's gone, man. Holy
My
crap.
mind blew like 15 minutes ago, Bob.
Keep going, though. Keep going.
I'm like, ooh.
Am I comprehensible? Are you
Oh,
guys
for sure.
with me?
I'm tripping into
All right,
existentialism here. So.
Please keep going, sir.
All right, so listen to this now. One single free radical molecule, all right? One single free radical. It could be an oxygen with an extra electron, or it could be an oxygen with a hydrogen with an extra electron. Free radicals have unpaired electrons. Electrons like to always exist in pairs. And as soon as you have an unpaired electron, it's looking to hold hands with something else, which makes it reactive, okay? So a single free radical molecule will react with all sorts of things depending on how strong that free radical is, all right? Some of them are really strong, and they react with anything as soon as they touch it. So a single free radical can interact with one of the bases in the DNA in one of your cells, and it can change that base. And if all of your homeostatic mechanisms don't prevent that, and then your DNA repair mechanisms can't fix it, and your immune system can't see the fact that you've created, for example, a cancer cell, that single molecule can amplify up through the organization of your biochemistry and kill you. Cancer. Okay? One fucking molecule can kill you. Now, you've got about 15 trillion cells of your kind, eukaryotic cells, making up your body. And every day, every one of those cells gets about 20,000 of these damages caused by free radicals, where one in the wrong place can kill you. And yet we're here alive talking about it.
It's kind of like
Pretty
people.
wild.
It's kind of like people, eh? Some people are just bad for you.
Exactly. It all depends on where they are and what they're doing, right?
That's
you
right.
Put them in a jail and they can't kill anybody.
Well, but and those people that are bad for you can actually affect you. I mean, I know that I'm affected by my surroundings, and when there's what I call drama going on, it really affects me, because obviously I'm right there. I'm going to get drawn into it, but I really don't want to be there. And then when it's done, it's like I've been punched in the gut and I feel ill.
I know exactly what you're saying, having had 3 ex-wives. No, so back to where we were here. A single molecule can kill you. You've got 20 million. I mean, you've got 15 trillion of these cells, each getting 20,000 damages a day. What that should be telling you is that your biochemistry has to be very specifically designed, selected for, to survive free radical damage. And that's the heart of what I'm going to talk about. Because what I'm saying is that while I'm on the one hand saying free radicals are bad for you and they damage you, on the other hand, they are critical regulators of your homeostasis. Because what happens is the complexity of your biochemistry has evolved so that you can do things on the one hand, but doing things is always going to make free radicals. So you've got to be able to do things, and you've got to be able to deal with the free radicals. And that's what all of your biochemistry is about. Letting you do things and letting you not kill yourself with free radicals. So we are constantly exposed to them, but they are what allows us to actually exist. Because in the complexity of our biochemistry, what we've selected for is the ability to self-monitor ourselves. The same way cannabis gives you awareness, your biochemistry has evolved self-awareness in that there are countless biochemical entities that detect free radical changes in otherwise normal entities. So I'll give you an example. We said a free radical could damage your DNA. Well, you have enzymes coded for by genes in your DNA that constantly slide up and down your DNA to check out if there's any screw-ups in your DNA. And if there is, they chop them out and repair it. It's called the DNA repair system. That's actually what I got my degree in. Free radical damage caused by X-rays. But now we're talking about free radical damage caused by our metabolism, by our very essential metabolism. So what I'm telling you now is that free radicals have two roles. On the one hand, they are damaging, and on the other hand, we wouldn't be here without them, because they are the constant signals that tell us anytime there's any imbalance in our biochemical flow. Because anytime there's an imbalance, we wind up generating free radicals to an excess degree, which starts to label things. And eventually, our biochemistry gets so screwed up that we have to shift into a safer mode. That safer mode is fat burning. So when we are burning fat, what you're really doing is you're recycling your biological molecules that were labeled with free radical damage. And what that allows you, it's the same, everything is a fractal. Our society is a fractal. Think about our society. The smarter we got, the more capable we were of doing things, the more waste we made. And now we're choking in our waste, so we're getting some feedback that says, hey, if you can't breathe your air or drink your water, maybe you're doing something wrong and you better fix it. And if you are living on a planet and you're making so much CO2 that you're changing the atmosphere, and it's going to destabilize our polar caps, and they're going to melt, and they're going to flood our shorelines. And by the way, what's going to also happen is we're going to melt the permafrost in Russia and release all that methane, and that's going to give us such an incredible, effect on our weather that the planet will turn into Mars, literally. Well, we hopefully have developed enough brains that we can say we better do something about this, all right? But your biochemistry has also developed those brains, and part of that is it turns on fat burning. So instead of making things to be more differentiated, more sophisticated, and more advanced, it backs up and it says it's time to recycle our shit, get rid of the garbage that we're choking on, and clean up our act. Well, think about it. If you're recycling your parts, you don't have to make everything because you've got parts that you can use. So you're going to require less energy. So you're going to make less free radicals, and you can afford to be a little less efficient in making them. Now, let me backtrack to something that I didn't finish earlier. So here we have our brains, and let's go back to the point when we were invertebrates, and we couldn't really get a better brain because otherwise it would get too hot, and it wouldn't work anymore. And now we evolved the CB1 receptor, and what it's regulating are calcium channels. And calcium was critical when you go back before life occurred. You know, you had the cliffs of Dover, calcium carbonate, and depending on the acidity of the ocean, it'll either dissolve them or not. That's exactly what's happening in you with your bones. Your bones are either releasing calcium or pulling it out. And why is calcium so critical? Because all of those flow-dependent structures that are involved in you doing anything are always activated by calcium, probably because of the role calcium played in that prebiotic soup. So if you're looking at your muscles, your immune system, your nervous system, your endocrine system, production of insulin, everything is dependent on calcium. So what that's telling you is that calcium's got to be involved in energy activation and therefore free radical production. So once you fine-tune that with the cannabinoid receptor, it allowed for our brains to evolve more. So the early invertebrates had no ability to really fine-tune that way, so their brains were limited. Once we evolved with this new chemistry, we as vertebrates, our big deal is adaptability. Look at the difference between a vertebrate and an invertebrate. We've got that spinal cord with our nervous system, our Wi-Fi running through it, our broadband running through it, communicating from your brain to your big toe at an instant. And all of that requires energy, and all of that will generate free radicals. So we have things that will quench those free radicals, antioxidants, our vitamin C, our vitamin E, all of those goodies that we eat from our veggies. They will help negate the free radicals. But the more you do, the more you make, and eventually you make more than you can quench. So now you've got to shift your biochemistry so you don't make so much. And ultimately, the solution to doing that is to turn on fat burning. So when you turn on fat burning, you're making fewer free radicals, and it goes hand in hand with the recycling that I was talking about. In biological terms, it's known as autophagy, self-eating. You eat yourself. A cell that has damaged pieces eats its damaged pieces and recycles them so that the cell can live and do whatever it was doing, or divide if that's what it needs to do.
So I guess the meaning,
Right?
there really is a meaning to the words "eat me."
Oh yeah. So now what you have, let's jump now up the evolutionary scale. What you see is that as vertebrates kept developing more and more complexity, their brains grew in complexity, and what you see is always an increase in that CB1 receptor, to the point that the more evolutionarily advanced areas of the human brain, for example, have more receptors than a monkey or than a dog, or you go back, There's a constant increase in CB1 receptors in the most evolutionarily advanced areas of our brain. Hint, we need to get high. That's what keeps us alive. It's what allowed us to be here. Let me give you a very.
I'm gonna cut you off 1 second. Let's take a quick break, and then we're gonna come back and let Dr. Bob finish, because I gotta go to the can, and I don't want to miss a thing. And we need to play a thing.
My brain needs to process some of this shit.
That's right. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. We're going to listen to a song and Chris's news, and because I don't want to take another break, I just want to let Dr. Bob go. But Chris did some news for us. Is that all right with you, Dr. Bob?
Absolutely. Of
Awesome.
course. I adapt. That's what it's about.
There you go.
It's accepting change and working with it.
So now, as we're going forward and accepting change, I noticed this afternoon that you shared a song by a band named Pussy Riot. and I
listen to him laughing.
I heard it earlier, like really early in the evening last night, or like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I saw you posted it. Now I've got it and I'm going to play it, but I would, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on what you posted, because I found it very interesting what you said, if you remember. He's looking.
You're asking who?
You. Do you remember? Do you remember what you said about the song when you posted it, the video?
No, I don't. What did I say?
I'm going to find it right now here. Just give me 1 second.
But see, I'm very interested in that because I'm very interested in freedom, And we hear all of the stuff about Russia, and Russians hear all of the stuff about us, because you're dealing with political people peddling their load basically to keep their shit together.
Exactly.
That's the group of the
Pussy Riot,
the musical group of women that were arrested for
Yes.
performing in a church, right?
Pussy Riot, they're called.
Yeah, they did 2 years in jail.
Yeah. I'm just.
So
you post a lot of stuff, man. I'm trying to find it on your wall now. Go on, continue while I'm looking, please.
Well, so I'm always very interested in politics and world affairs. Yeah. I guess in particular because I owe my life to Adolf Hitler and to Tojo, because my father was a GI in Germany, and my mother was a young Fräulein, and I popped I. Yeah. So, and then when I was growing up, this was in the early 50s.
Yep.
My father had come back from World War II. You didn't have very much TV, but what we did have on TV was Victory at Sea. So and my mom was German. So I always was involved with that whole consciousness of the war. So I think that made me very tuned in to history more so than otherwise. Plus, my birthday is December 7th.
What you said was, I've got it here, and then I'm going to play it, and we're going to all go and run to the bathroom real quick. We all need to remember where we came from. Stardust and neutral selection, with a little help from
I should have said natural selection.
Sorry, natural. I'm dyslexic. I did mention that. Natural selection with a little help from the endocannabinoid system. No, that was hard to say. Endocannabinoid.
We could tell you were struggling with it there.
Well, everything that I'm telling you now, that I've been telling you this past time, is exactly what that statement means.
Okay, well, we're going to listen to the song. Now, I will say some of you may be offended, so if you are, please don't leave. Just turn it down. We'll be back in about 10 minutes or so after Chris does his news. This is the 420 Radio Show. We are live with Dr. Robert Melamede, and we'll be right back.
Please hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold. If you will listen carefully, you will agree that the concepts will contribute to the rearing of a mature person who has a healthy, responsible attitude toward the sexual side of his life.
but my badge is a badge of honor. I take pride in the way we rise. One love to Maya Angelou, the If-World wonder. How we do it all, sometimes I wonder. I could play nice so I could bring that thunder. So sad I gotta end right here, but this vagina gotta go make them numbers. Don't make stupid, don't make dumb vaginas. Where you really from? Where you from? Where you from? Where you from? Don't make stupid, don't make dumb vaginas. Where you really from? Where you from? Where you from? Don't make stupid, don't make dumb vaginas. Where you really from? Where you from? Where you from? Where you from? Don't make stupid, don't make dumb vaginas. Where you really from? Where you from? Where you from?
This is how we all came into the world.
That's not all you go out with girls for, is it?
Going out with girls is fun.
Growing your own vegetables, flowers, or even medicinal plants can be a challenge without the right equipment and proper know-how. At BMA Hydroponics, not only are they your urban horticultural experts and suppliers, but their staff holds the customer's needs paramount to making a sale. Family-owned with decades of experience and knowledge, they offer free advice in person, by phone, or email. BMA Hydroponics wants to ensure you have the advice you need, which is why you'll find tips and tricks on different ways to grow, like wick, ebb and flow, drip, or aeroponic system, as well as other helpful links at bmahydroponics.com. If you can't find what you're looking for, just let them know, and they'll do everything they can to get what you're looking for. At BMA Hydroponics, each staff member also possesses a federal exemptee MMAR license, making their strong suit empathy, experience, and dedication to their customers. Because when you know how to grow, you'll have results that make you proud. BMA Hydroponics in Belleville, Ontario. Visit bmahydroponics.com.
Good evening. I'm Coulter Wonkite. I'm already into the 420, damn it.
Welcome to the 420 Radio Show, and this is your 420 seconds of news with Chris Backer. Richard Bergman used to investigate people in BC for cannabis grow-ops in possession of pot as a sergeant in the RCMP. But now the retired officer is fighting the war on drugs as a civilian and concerned parent in the suburban Ottawa. He pleaded with Chief Charles Bordello at the Police Services Board meeting Monday to crack down on cannabis dispensaries, especially the two that have popped up in his Orleans neighborhood, one of which is just steps away from a kids' tutoring center and a martial arts club. Loving and caring parents cry disbelief when they walk their children to tutoring clinics and taekwondo studios that have a marijuana store right beside it. Speaking on behalf of parents who didn't have time to attend the board meeting Monday evening, Bergman called the lack of police enforcement a direct assault on our children. Police across Canada are faced with the challenge of enforcing the current laws that are poised to change with legalization of cannabis, as the new federal government has pledged to do. In Toronto, police have raided countless shops over the past few months, only to see some of them reopen the next day. Cracking down on them, Bordello said, is more complicated than just showing up at the front door with a police badge. There have been no such raids targeting the 16 known shops in Ottawa, but Ottawa's police chief confirmed there are active investigations into the businesses. We don't have at the Ottawa Police Service the ability to say you can't open, Bordello said. We don't have that legal authority. The chief also suggested that the city have a role in mitigating the proliferation of these businesses by strengthening licensing bylaws to prevent them from opening in the first place. Councillor Jody Middick, whose Innes ward has 2 cannabis dispensaries, said after the meeting Monday he has received hundreds of emails and phone calls from upset residents. While he said he will support recreational cannabis once it's legalized, he said he echoes his constituents' calls for police to take action now against the illegal pot shops. And now Shoppers Drug Mart wades into the cannabis market while Justin Trudeau stands around with cold feet. With the promise of legalization around the corner, the pharmacy has decided to take advantage of the burgeoning market. A public request by shoppers to sell pot in its stores shows the pusher stigma has finally begun to fade. Shoppers is part of the Loblaws chain known across Canada for its family-friendly Canadian superstores and President's Choice brands. The move by Shoppers Drug Mart shows government inaction can't stop the evolving position of cannabis in Canadian society, but the longer Ottawa waits to make its rules, the more it loses control. Sky High Holistic of Santa Ana, California was involved in a controversial raid over the summer in which 3 police officers with the Santa Ana Police Department were caught on sky-high surveillance camera eating cannabis edibles and playing darts. One officer can even be heard making jokes about wanting to kick Marla James, an amputee, in her quote-unquote fucking nub. The dispensary was now applied enough legal pressure that the city of Santa Ana has agreed to pay a settlement of $100,000. Money that will be split between dispensary volunteers Marla and David James and a physician who lost the use of his utilities as a result of the raid. The city has also agreed to drop all charges. The 3 police officers responsible for embarrassing the entire Santa Ana police force had either resigned or been terminated at this point. This is because the Orange County District Attorney's Office went after them, slapping all 3 with a variety of charges ranging from misdemeanor theft to vandalism. They have since pled not guilty and are due back in court some point next month. Not long after being charged, the cops filed a lawsuit with the Orange County Superior Court in an attempt to get the video suppressed as evidence, claiming their privacy rights had been violated. However, the complaint was tossed out of court because the judge said cops should not expect privacy in their on-duty performance of an official function at a cannabis dispensary. The Bolivian government's Special Force for the Struggle Against Narco-Trafficking, FELCN, have seized 8 metric tons of cannabis across the region this October. Several campesinos were arrested and crops burned in the fields at various locations. The Bolivian newspaper La Razón named the site of major raids. Both lie on the edge of the rainforest just where the plateau drops down into the Amazon. This transition zone is the country's key cocoa production area, but now more and more cocaliers, or cocoa leaf growers, are apparently turning to cannabis. According to the official reports by the Prensa Latina, from January to August, the FELCN seized 114 tons of drugs in 7,874 raids across the country. But unfortunately, they don't break the stats down by the drug. And British Sugar will be swapping tomato plants for cannabis seedlings after signing a long-term contract to supply this crop to the drug company GW Pharmaceuticals. The cannabis plants, which are of a non-psychoactive variety, will be grown in British Sugar's 18-hectare glasshouse in Wissington, Norfolk, where the company, a subsidiary of Associated British Foods, is currently cultivating tomatoes. The space is the equivalent of 23 football fields. Every year we try to work out the best commercial assets for the glass house. Paul Kenward, Managing Director of British Sugar. Our glass house is very well suited for growing that particular variety of cannabis plant family, and it's fair to say that the return will be better than on tomatoes. We're confident of decent yields. GW Pharmaceuticals, a UK biotech, has developed an experimental treatment called Epidiolex for severe forms of childhood epilepsy. It is derived from compounds in the cannabis plant that have achieved stellar results in the final stage trials. The glass house will provide enough raw crop a year to treat 40,000 children globally, making British Sugar a major supplier to GW. GW wanted a very professional grower, and we have that expertise. This is a crop that grows into medicines, and we need to be grown consistently and reliably, said Mr. Kenward. By growing this crop, we are indirectly helping sick children and doing something socially worthwhile. GW plans to file the drug with the U.S. regulators in the first half of 2017, and Chief Executive Justin Gover hopes that the treatment could be on the U.S. market by the end of next year, with the European launch following shortly thereafter. And the number of cannabis and hemp fairs in Italy has skyrocketed in recent years. The biggest in southern Italy, the Canapa in Mostra, was held in Naples this month under the shadow of Vesuvius, the region's 1,277-meter-tall active volcano. Crowds flocked to the event for entertainment, dynamic conference speakers, and roughly 90 different exhibitors. Opening the fair, which ran from October 14th to 16th, was the charismatic mayor of Naples, Luigi de Magistris, who has signaled his openness to cannabis as an industrial resource, medicine, and source of inspiration. His support curried favor within the cannabis community, and organizers presented de Magistris with a 3D printed crown of hemp leaves embellished with a 22-karat gold hemp leaf. Hopes are high that de Magistris could help fuel a soft revolution in Naples. His approach is certainly different from the past. His predecessor, Rosa Russo Gervolino, was responsible for an anti-cannabis law during his time as Minister of Domestic Affairs. The law so disgusted the Italian people that the country passed a referendum in 1993 to fully decriminalize cannabis use. Italy's legal hemp economy is growing fast. The country is now Europe's third largest producer after France and Lithuania, with 2,070 hectares harvested in 2015. There are roughly 120 farms growing hemp in southern Italy, as well as dozens of paper manufacturers and other processors. Conexus of Sicily produces bioplastics from hemp, and one of the bigger players, South Hemp Techno, opened a hemp processing plant in Crispiano, Tarantino in 2014 that it's widely considered the best in Italy. Public opinion and media coverage are evolving along with the industry. 10 years ago, the Fumero cannabis shop was discredited by the media as a new shop where drug addicts could find replacement organs. These days, the same publications seem much more open to cannabis becoming part of the mainstream. All this is unfolding as Naples works to reinvent itself as an open, modern, and tolerant city. And that's been your news. Peace, love, and hippie shit. Back to you guys.
Tune into the Pace Radio Show and catch Kim Cooper, Debbie Stoll-Skiffen, or Allison Murden, along with myself, Al Grant, as we talk to Canadian and international cannabis advocates who are working hard to help patients and to end cannabis prohibition. Catch us live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at lifestyleradio.ca.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
You like music, you like weed, well, we gonna be good friends indeed. This is how much I like more than smoking trees. They'll make you dance the do-si-do and teach you how the chiba grows. Smoke a bowl on the 420 radio show. On Lifestyle Radio.
I'm feeling really good and very strong and very happy that I am now almost free of seizures and for 48 days. So I feel so much stronger and better and much more better than I ever felt before in my whole entire life. This is like the best day ever. This is like a dream come true.
Tune in to the 420 Radio Show. Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. With Marcel, Lori, and Al. Along with their guests. Tunes. 420 seconds of news with Chris Backer. And weekly grow tips from Ross Middleton of BMA Hydroponics. Pull up your couch. Grab a coffee. Light up and join us right here on lifestyleradio.ca.
And we are back. This is the 420 Radio Show, probably one of the most stimulating shows I've had in a few years. We're talking with Dr. Robert Melamede, or as we in the community lovingly call him as Dr. Bob. And
Dr. Bob, paging Dr. Bob.
Your bong is ready, sir.
Jason's here too. Dr. Bob wanted to continue where he left off, so we're going to let him. So enjoy.
All right, so we were talking about complexity and how evolution continues to generate more complexity, and how with the emergence of the vertebrates, something new happened. We had the CB1 receptor, that gets you high. And what I want to explain now is how, by virtue of that modulating efficient energy production, it led to the human brain. And how, as you look up the evolutionary scale, you keep seeing more and more CB1 receptors in the most evolutionarily advanced areas of our brain. And by the way, our endocannabinoid system is the most abundant neurotransmitter system in your brain, and we don't teach it in medical school. Your endocannabinoid system in general homeostatically regulates everything in your body because it regulates free radicals, which regulate everything in your body. So we don't teach the most fundamental reality of life in our medical school. So now I want to explain this, the kind of the proof of that, in a sense,
Okay.
in one particular aspect.
Please do.
Your brain is 5% of your body weight, and it uses 20% of your energy. And you feel your head is always hot. Well, it's hot when you're making energy efficiently, which is why you need to make energy efficiently, otherwise it would be too hot. And as you know, brain and the head is very susceptible to injury. There's a fundamental reason for that. The reason is that it's always in that sugar burning mode, in that electron transport system mode for making energy efficiently, and therefore always susceptible to any free radicals that would be made as a consequence of any kind of backup in the flow. There's an interesting little visual for this that I'd like to try out on you guys. Imagine you have a hose, and it's got a turn on one end and a shut off on the other end, and that the hose has a bunch of pinholes in it. Now, if the hose is open and you turn on the faucet, those pinholes don't leak and the water comes out the end. That's energy flowing through your electron transport system. And the water that comes out the end is used to make your ATP, your energy, okay, in this little visual here. But now imagine you either turn the faucet up really, really high, or you turn down the outflow so that pressure builds up in the hose. Now you're going to start to have leaks. Think of those leaks as your free radicals. So that's what goes on. As soon as too much goes in, like you're eating too much, or not enough is going out because you're not exercising and using the fuel, then you wind up making extra free radicals. But because these free radicals, remember, one molecule can kill you, and you're making this incredible number in all of your cells, what I'm saying is that most of your biochemistry is simply designed to keep the energy flowing and to keep you keep the cells from self-destroying with too many free radicals. In other words, apoptosis or necrosis, which are the two general forms of cell death. Apoptosis is kind of a slow unbubbling. It forms little balls that are membrane bound, and they can be eaten up by your immune system, as opposed to if you poke open a cell and it bursts all its guts out, because then it's extremely inflammatory. Because all of the things in the cell, so you got to remember, everything is talking to everything else. All of those chemicals that we're dealing with here are parts of flow and parts of harmony, and it's like an LSD trip where you're watching all of these visuals interacting and flowing with fluidity. That's what's going on in your biochemistry. And for things to be activated, your mitochondria, the energy factories, they open up little holes and they let calcium in, which then activates the electron transport system, so you make all this ATP. But if there's any impairment in the flow, then you make more free radicals, which then homeostatically tell the system to do something differently, because otherwise you're going to make too many free radicals and the cell will die. And ultimately an organism will die if enough cells die. So anyway, 20% of your energy usage comes from your brain, which is only 5%, which is why your brain has to be in that energy efficient mode, which is why it's so susceptible to damage. In contrast, you look at your heart, 70% of its energy production, 60-70% comes from burning fat. So that means it's in the recycling mode. So, your heart goes through a burst where it needs a lot of energy, makes electron transport system, makes free radicals, damages things, and then it goes back to fat burning, recycles the problem, and everything is cool, except if you're eating the wrong foods. And for example, all that fat that clogs up people's arteries, it's not because they're eating fat, because they're eating carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are turned into saturated fats. You cannot make unsaturated fats. They are essential nutrients. We get them out of fish and seed oils, things like that. And they happen to have the ability to turn down inflammation. How do they do that? They turn on fat burning. So there's a lot of nutraceuticals that are very good for you. Vitamin D turns on fat burning. Resveratrol, that comes from red wine, turns on fat burning. Your polyunsaturated fatty acids, your omega-3s. Again, the stupidity of the medical industry. Every doctor will tell you, eat fish oil and polyunsaturated fatty acids. They're good for you. Take in your omega-3s. And then they'll turn around and they'll say, marijuana is no good for you. We don't know what it does. We know what it does, but they don't know what it does because they don't read the literature. Those fish oils are how your body makes pot. That's why it's good for you. Those same doctors don't understand that every time they get hungry, it's because their brain made some pot and they gave themselves the munchies. They don't understand that your endocannabinoid system regulates everything in your body from conception until death. Your immune system, digestive system, endocrine system, cardiovascular system, nervous system, digestive system, reproductive system, muscle, skin, bones, everything in your body is regulated and kept in balance by the pot that you make and the pot that you eat. If you don't have pain, chronic pain, your body makes enough pot. If you are in chronic pain, you need to take in some more, and you need to change your diet so you're not screwing yourself by what you're eating. And that goes back again to the insanity that's been perpetrated on the public with fat-free diets. You know, just think, use simple little logic here. You think your arteries are going to clog up with fat if you're burning fat? Or if you're making fat? You know, it's that simple. And that simplicity holds everywhere. You know, for example, let's look at diabetes quick. You know, here you have either insulin-resistant diabetes or you have type 1 where you don't make any insulin at all. All right? Well, let's look what's going on. You're eating all these carbohydrates. You're making all these free radicals. Your sugar levels in your blood goes up. That alone, for physiological reasons, is not good. You know, too much sugar changes the osmotic activity of your blood. It's not healthy, okay? So your pancreas senses that and makes insulin. And what's that insulin do? It binds to receptors on cells throughout your body and tells them to take up the sugar and burn it. Well, what if they've been burning too much and they've been making too many free radicals and the cell has said, too many free radicals, shift pathways, do not burn any more sugar? Well, guess what? That's what's called type 2 diabetes, insulin-resistant diabetes. And what is it? It's simply your cells saying, stop killing me. I don't want any more sugar. But being stupid as we are, we ignore that, and we keep giving them the shitty diet until the pancreas is burnt out making insulin. Because it keeps trying to make insulin because the sugar levels are too high in your blood, but the cells are saying, I ain't going to help you anymore because you're killing me. And then finally the cells stop producing any insulin because they undergo apoptosis because they made too many free radicals trying. It's crazy. And if you have type 1 diabetes or if you're insulin dependent, I have many friends now who no longer use insulin. Why? Because they go on a ketogenic diet. A ketogenic diet, you make ketone bodies when you burn fat. And if you make enough of them, then it shows up in your blood. So it's a big fad right now, a ketogenic diet. Why? Because guess what? You lose weight when you're burning fat. So my one friend who's like 300 pounds, he just lost 20. He hasn't been taking insulin for about 3 months now. His sugar levels are normal because he uses oil every day, which turns on fat burning. You see what's going on? I didn't get into the CB2 receptor yet. Let me back up and try to dissect this further. Your CB1 receptor regulates your calcium channels so that you can stay in the sugar-burning mode and make energy efficiently so that you can have a brain. In contrast, and it evolved later, your CB2 receptor turns on fat burning. Now, the more your brain is advanced, the more, those early vertebrates were able to run around, which means they were exposed to more things, which meant that they needed to develop their immune system in order to survive the greater levels of exposure by being more alive because they were using the CB1 receptor, okay? So, because remember, your immune system is monitoring mass that comes into the system. Well, it turns out that CB2 was first discovered in the immune system and was called the peripheral receptor or the immune receptor. But after all this time, and I've been talking about this for years, the scientific literature never really talks about what I'm telling you. CB2 turns on fat burning. It turns on autophagy, self-eating, okay? Now, let's look at what goes on with viruses. Let's look at HIV, okay? HIV developed in a differentiated environment. It's developed, in humans, and we have this very complicated system of everything, us, and yet this virus has evolved the ability to kill us. Well, that virus evolved, all of its adaptability evolved in the differentiated sugar-burning mode of our cells, of our immune cells, that for the most part, when they're making antibodies or doing these other things, they have to turn on sugar burning, all right? Because they need to make the energy efficiently. So HIV has evolved and lives in a world of sugar burning, where cells are communicating with each other because they're differentiated and sophisticated because they make energy efficiently. Well, guess what happens if you turn on fat burning by eating lots of cannabis and taking nutrients like I described that turn on fat burning? You control HIV. So I've got one friend who's had HIV for 26 years. When I first met him about 5 years ago, he was fully drug resistant and had full-blown HIV. He had HIV count in the millions, had no T cells, had dyslipidemia from all the years of using the antiretrovirals, and we were in Washington, D.C. lobbying for a biotech bill because he needed new drugs. This guy's a piece of work. And he comes down with a Kaposi sarcoma. These, this is what killed everybody back in the day before the antiretrovirals. You'd see people with HIV with purple blotches all over them. It's basically a blood cancer. It looks like a skin cancer, but it's really blood vessels that are growing cancerously, and eventually it hits your organs inside and you die. There's no cure. It's all bullshit. The doctors say, we can treat it. Yeah, they pick off a couple of your scabs and then you die. That's treatment. How ridiculous can you be? This is the number one cancer in Africa.
Wow.
Because you got so much untreated AIDS. Okay. Yeah. And they just let the people die horrible, painful deaths. All right, so my friend comes down with one. We're in Washington, D.C., in Congress, and I pull out my jar of oil. I say, here, put this on. And he was hesitant because this guy's a character in his own right, but I don't want to go off into that right now. I go back to Colorado. He goes back to New York. 3 days later, I get a phone call. He goes, Bob, what the fuck is going on here? I'm holding a Kaposi sarcoma in my hand. They're not supposed to fall off. So now it's 5 years later. He's got undetectable viral load, even with a spinal tap. He has normal levels of T cells, although they're not all functional. And he got rid of the dyslipidemia on his back. You should already know what's going on here. You're not going to deposit fat on your back or in your gut, in your organs. If you're burning fat, you're not storing fat. You're only storing fat when you're eating all those carbohydrates and burning all those sugars. All of that fat is there because your body is trying to protect your cells from you killing them with all the sugar. So we can control viral infections. We can control cancers. It's all the same kind of a story. You see, when you're always in the sugar burning mode, that's normal for us because we eat too many sugars. 100 years ago, we ate much more fat, and that's why the ketogenic diets are so healthy for people. So we're able to promote health by reducing free radical production. And again, free radicals are the heart of aging. They're the heart of all age-related illnesses. So whether you're talking about cognitive dysfunction, Alzheimer's, or you're talking about autoimmunity, multiple sclerosis, you're talking about heart disease, cancer, all of these things tend to start, for the most part, as sugar-burning cells making too many free radicals, and then, and now I'll tell you some very radical things now that nobody in the scientific world believes except for me, but they don't even know it because they don't want to hear it. The metabolism that changes between fat and sugar burning changes by virtue of chromosomal architecture. You know, you've got, every one of your cells has 1 yard's worth of DNA in it. That's crazy. When you think you can't even see the cell and it's got a yard's worth of DNA, and it's got to duplicate that and then partition it into dividing cells. That's just insane. You know, it's beyond comprehension to visualize that. Anyway, where was I going? I forgot where I was going.
While you're thinking, I have a question, actually.
Yes.
Al Graham of the Pace Radio Show here on Wednesday nights asks, are autoimmune conditions... Oh, Al... he asked me something else. I got to find it again here. 1 second here. Sorry. Are autoimmune conditions related cannabinoid deficiencies?
Yes, because they're related to free radical excess.
Okay. I hope that answered your question. Did you remember what you were saying?
No, of course not. I don't remember what else. I don't remember saying anything.
Marcel, maybe we should take a second here. Marcel, why don't we were talking off break about the fact that Marcel had MS. Why don't you elaborate, Marcel?
Oh, actually, that's a perfect thing to talk about here.
What was that?
So that's a perfect thing to talk about. MS is an autoimmune disease, and it winds up basically destroying the myelin sheaths, which is basically insulation over your wires, your nerves. And without that insulation, your nerves don't conduct properly. And as a result of not conducting properly, they make more free radicals and they eventually die. So that's why you progress from bad to worse, typically. So when you take enough cannabis, you turn on fat burning, and your nerves can burn fats as well. They just normally are not doing that. But when you burn fat, you produce ketones. And ketosis, can serve as a replacement for glucose in your brain. And it turns on the recycling, but the other thing that it does is it turns on stem cells. Think about it. Stem cells are cells that can replace your other cells when they're aged and damaged. So, for example, in your brain, your cannabinoid receptors, your CB1 receptor, is responsible for neurogenesis, making new neurons. Okay? What does it make new neurons from? Stem cells. So you want to have enough stem cells that you can make enough neurons to replace the ones that are dying. Okay? Now, you take the high doses of cannabis, the neurons that are dying are going to stop dying because they're going to not be making as many free radicals because they're going to be burning fat. And you're going to be expanding your stem cells because stem cells divide by burning fat. Stem cells have two different modes of division. They can do what's called symmetrical division, where they make one stem cell turns into two stem cells, turns into four stem cells, and you're only making stem cells. That's all driven by fat burning. That's all driven by the CB2 receptor. We know that that hemopoiesis, the production of new blood cells, is promoted by cannabis. We know that in the nervous system, you generate new nerves, neurogenesis, and you make new connections, plasticity, driven by the CB1 receptor. But what you need to be able to do as you turn on sugar burning in the fat burning stem cells is you need to have enough stem cells. So the fat burning expands the stem cells, and then the CB1 differentiates them, and that's why you've overcome your neurological deficiencies. Now, there is a school of thought, and this may be the situation where we're seeing different people essentially curing themselves of MS. Because I've seen that as well now with people who've taken the high doses. And what I think is going on is the high doses are expanding your stem cells, and because you're using cannabis, your CB1 are then differentiating them. And I think there's probably a lot of different ways, a lot of insults that could trigger the immune response that leads to MS. And there is a whole school of thought that MS is caused by things like Lyme disease, Burgdorfia, the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, or other viruses or bacteria that wind up promoting this neurological deterioration as a result of immune cells acting on inflamed and in an inflammatory situation. So taking the high doses of cannabis could have actually killed whatever pathogens were leading to the immune response that led to the MS. So that would be my take on what's going on there.
Right. Chlamydia pneumoniae is the one in the lungs that's been associated with MS, and that was back in the 1800s. So
there's a variety of things that have been implicated, but and I know of one doctor that I haven't spoken with him for 20, 30 years, but he was down in Tennessee there. I forgot the university, Vanderbilt, and he believed that all MS came from different kinds of pathological infections. And he was using PCR, which is a very sensitive technique to amplify DNA or RNA, if you're looking at an RNA virus, for example, so that you could detect things that you couldn't detect by other means. It's extremely sensitive. So this has been going around for a while here. And I was actually on the phone the other day with an alternative physician friend of mine who hasn't drank the pharmaceutical Kool-Aid. And she was saying as well that a lot of this MS is again, just a variant on certain types of infection. So it's out there, and that would certainly be an easy way of explaining how cannabis was able to reverse it.
Oh, I figured that out a long time ago.
Oh, no, that's awesome. Yeah, but you didn't explain it like that, Marcel.
No. But see, here was my take on
You've
MS,
never really... No.
I was told that it was an autoimmune disorder. I was told that it was by, of course, neurologists.
No, but it is autoimmune because your immune cell system is doing it on your cells. But the question is why.
But then the other aspects were the vascular aspects, and this is why the CCSVI treatment is so successful for so many, because they actually get some blood flow out of their brain. And then, of course, the fungal one, which was the chlamydia, the pneumonia chlamydia. I looked at cannabis as well. It works and is patented as a neuroprotectant. So if it's neurological, then I'll use cannabis. Antifungal and antibacterial, cannabis does that, so I could cover that base. And cannabis is a vasodilator. So it would cover the vascular issue. So no matter what they threw at me of this is the reason of MS, cannabis was already proven to be able to correct all of those conditions.
So again, remember, everything in life is holistic. So if you're healthy holistic. If you're ill holistic. And cannabis regulates everything. So it's the ultimate modulator of your holistic biochemistry, being able to drive you through either safely through sugar burning or by protecting you and turning you into the fat burning. It's just amazing because it will promote, from what I'm believing, your stem cell regeneration of your organisms. Of your organs, rather. Your organisms.
That'd be nice, though.
I'm 69 years old. I have all sorts of nasty inflammatory crap because of my genetics. And cannabis has kept me, quite remarkably well, through having gone through a variety of nasties. I've got what's called HLA-B27. It's one of your immune genes that tends to promote pro-inflammatory stuff. In particular, something called ankylosing spondylitis, which is basically arthritis of your back and spine, as well as psoriasis. And I've got psoriasis. I don't have the ankylosing because I've used cannabis my whole life. Doctors are quite surprised. I've got a variety of arthritic conditions. At times, like 1 year ago, every joint in my body hurt. I was in so much pain. I had gout on top of all of that, and I was recovering from heart failure from having AFib for 12 years. So what I wound up doing is just significantly increasing my already high doses of cannabis and doubling or quadrupling all of the fat burning and antioxidants that I consume. And now, a year later, I haven't had gout for a year. And that, in conjunction with going to a chiropractor regularly, so that to help with the sciatica, all of these things come together, and I'm feeling pretty remarkably good. I run regularly. I go to the gym. I should have been there tonight, but I'm on the phone with you guys. I forgot.
You could have done it running.
You could have done it from the gym.
Yeah, you could have been on running and working out on your phone.
No, I don't run in gyms. I can't stand treadmills. I run outside. I go to the gym and I use the weight machines, workout machines.
So
I've exercised my whole life. When I was in high school, I was on the gym team, gymnastics team, and when I went to college, I started out as a chemistry major, but my second year in school, I used to like explosives. And I played with explosives and blew myself up and wound up in the hospital. So I dropped out of being a chemistry major. When I was 16, two things happened. I started college and I started smoking dope, and then I blew myself up at 17. And so I changed my attitude towards schooling and everything else, because I was, even though I started young, I'm not a very good student because I'm basically very ADD. I have trouble reading a sentence.
Yeah, me too.
So I jump around, and jumping around is great because that means I read a little bit of everything.
That's right.
And that's why I know so much.
They taught me in public school. They taught me how to scan because I have ADHD and I'm dyslexic. So they taught me how to scan, and that helped me a little bit. But what really helped me was the screen right in front of my face. I mean, I get an exam and I freeze up. I have a hard time. I forget everything. I fail automatically. But you give me a practical exam, a hands-on exam, and 90s.
Yep.
Right. The computer screen has helped me. I sit in front of 3 computer screens all the time. I read news. I won't say for a living because I don't make a living at this, but I read the news 99% of the day. And I was never able to do that as a kid. I don't think I've ever read through a book completely in my life.
Yeah, I don't read books either. I can't.
Movies, yeah.
I don't read whole scientific articles either, because I can't. Plus, at this point, I know everything they say. As soon as I read the beginning, I know where they're going, and as long as I know the techniques, I understand it all.
You see, but
it allows me to just jump around.
You take it from a different perspective, though. You take it. Your brain works science all the time. It's you're always thinking about a solution,
yep.
Right? So, I mean, from a learning point, the absorption, how you retain all of that information, you must have either a huge penis or a big brain, one of the two. Because you're storing it somewhere.
Well, you know what? It's flow dependent. It's a different kind of learning. Let me tell you how I taught my classes, and you'll understand what I do. So my advanced classes, which included endocannabinoids and medical marijuana, aging, and DNA repair, those were the 3 advanced classes that I really loved. And I don't give any exams. And the first 2 weeks of the classes, no matter which class I taught, advanced or non-advanced, would be about the far from equilibrium thermodynamics, so that people would understand that we're all part of this constant creative flow.
Yes.
And then I would take attendance, and I would give the students credit for asking me questions or answering my question, and I made them sure they understood that my class was a joint research project between them and me trying to show whether the things I'm talking about, which are the things I've talked about tonight, are real or not. Their job is to question me and show me where something is wrong, or let's work together and show that something is right.
So now
and
here,
at the end of the year,
here comes the skill testing question. There's going to be an exam after this, people. I hope you've been taking notes.
No, it's the exact opposite. Came the end of and I told them right in the beginning, there's no exams.
Okay.
At the end of the year, they have to write out. I give them their grades based on their attendance and the questions. I give them a number, and I show what the numbers. Different people in the class had their numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what they have to do is they have to give themselves a grade and write a one-page justifying the grade they gave themselves. Because the whole design of the class is not to be stressed. Because listen, everything I'm telling you about, health is distance from equilibrium. You can go further from equilibrium by developing your muscles or your mind. So it's natural for us to be healthy by learning more. Yeah. And that's all part of what I teach them. And the responses I got were that students learned more in my class than any of their other classes. It was the only class they would go home and talk to their family and friends about, and they loved it.
And that makes sense to me because, you know, back in the 60s, I would go to history and we would walk in, and I can't even remember his name. He was that memorable. We would walk in and he would be writing on the board, and there would be 6 boards full of his writing, and he would say, write that down. It's going to be on a test at the end of the week. Then I would go to my next class, which was music, and then I'd be out back smoking a doobie with the music teacher, and then we'd go in and we'd make some awesome fucking music. I'd blow the trumpet for the band and all that shit. You know, I mean, like totally different teaching styles. You can't get away with that now. You know, I'm the son of a doctor and a vice principal / teacher. So I mean, both things are done totally differently now. You know.
Well, I know that it worked for me because the stuff that I've learned and that I explain to you people is because my students have asked me the hard questions. You see, we spent years with teaching those classes so that they verified it all with me. You know, it really was a joint, no pun intended, the research development project in all of my classes. I wasn't there to teach them. Yeah. We were there to learn together.
And at the top of the show, I don't remember if I actually said it, but I know I was joking with everybody just before we started the show. The one question I wanted to ask you was, why? And you explained why. You really did. I mean, I got it.
Why what?
Why does it work?
Oh, yeah, because it's the essence of our life.
Do you think that cannabis could be considered the tree of life?
Absolutely. I work, my friends, I work with people all over the world. You know, I have a lot of crazy friends. And in Jamaica, my friends are the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church, you know, leaders of the church. I'm involved in a $350 million project there because they're reorienting the entire economy of the country. It's a whole deal. But anyway, for them, cannabis is the sacrament. And for me, scientifically, they are correct.
I have to agree.
Doctor, here in Canada, I don't know if you're aware, Health Canada has taken it upon themselves to think that 3 to 5 grams is the maximum amount that any patient really would need in the way of cannabis. And I'm thinking you probably disagree with that, huh?
Well, let's see, if they had 5 grams and you had an efficient extraction, that would give you, you know, a tenth, let's say. So you'd get 1/5 of a gram of oil. That's not nearly enough for most people who need it for serious health reasons. So that's ridiculous.
Yeah, beautiful. That's what I thought you'd say.
Especially when at one point I was using 5 grams a day.
Yes. Is that the person who had MS?
Yeah. That was 5 grams of oil per day.
Yep. So you don't need to take that anymore, 5 grams, do you?
No. Actually, I'm taking.
How long did you take it for before things got fixed?
I was researching it and changing formulations to find better way to work, and that didn't happen until about 2012. So from 2012 is when I figured it out. 2013 is when I started implementing it, and I started cutting back on my dosage in 2015 because the neurological damage was already repaired, and I was starting to get high. And what I found is my body was repairing. I was starting to get high where I was never high before. Now I'm taking maybe 1/50th of a gram a day.
Oh,
in
20
a different
milligrams
formulation.
Very little.
Yeah, I'm taking an extremely small amount.
You also smoke a lot too, right?
But I smoke a lot.
Well?
Microdosing now.
Yeah, I microdose now and for me it's more. I stay completely pain-free. I stay completely symptom-free, and I don't get high, so I'll just leave it at that dose.
Oh, nice.
But let's also remind people that even though that works for Marcel,
it doesn't necessarily going to work for everybody else.
That's right. But there may be a combination of what Marcel is doing and what another patient is doing.
That's why
that's one of the things
our own clinical trials.
I always
now.
emphasize. We as individuals, even if you took twins, the biochemistry of 2 twins is not the same. No way in 1 cell is it the same, let alone in 15 trillion cells. So we are all completely different. Even if we have the same genetics, our biochemistry is completely different. And the cannabis plant is so unique in its ability, not just with THC and CBD and the other cannabinoids, but all the other terpenes that are in there are all profoundly important in terms of modifying these biochemical pathways. Something that I've come to realize, and I now absolutely am convinced it's true, is that when you look at other herbal medicines, when you look at all of the Chinese medicines, almost every medicine you look at, when you look at what the active ingredient is, you will find that active ingredient turns on fat burning and hence is anti-inflammatory. And all of these terpenes that we can get out of all of these different fruits and vegetables are in cannabis. So different strains emphasize different cannabinoids, different terpenes, and different other things. And the key is to match up the plant with the person. There's no way to do that up front. People should just get out there, get stoned, use different ones, find what works, and then, live a happy life.
I'm glad you said that.
Amen. Amen. Hear, hear.
If I had a hand clapping machine right now, it would be going off.
Everybody's saying, what's the ratio of C? That's bullshit. There's no magic ratio.
How much do I take is the question that I got. How much do I take every day?
That's becoming stupid like the FDA. The FDA is the biggest farce. The fact that these assholes talk about the double-blind standard as the golden standard, the double-blind control. Think of what they're doing. They take some poison pill and they figure out that you can take certain amount of this and not die, and that they can demonstrate some statistically significant change in some parameter that may be so insignificant as to have nothing to do with your health, but it was still statistically significant.
It makes it justifiable.
And it's just insane. Yeah. They're going to test it in some subset of people, and then magically you take this quantity, this amount of times every day. We don't care if you're man, woman, young, old. We don't care what your diet is. None of that matters because we did the triple blind. What a bunch of fucking idiots.
But
there we
I'll
go.
Jump in here on this one.
Here we go.
We kind of have no choice but to do those types of studies to appease government like Health Canada. So we're doing double-blind studies using a cannabis product.
We're doing what fucking Health Canada should be doing.
Right, and we're getting astounding results, and we're starting our PTSD trial this week.
Sweet. Well, you know what? Listen to this. This is what's going on, and this is what's going to happen if Canada's as stupid as the U.S. But looking at what's happening in the U.S., it's actually beautiful because the idiots, the blips, the backward-looking cannabinoid deficient people are committing suicide and they don't even know it. So it's my contention that backward-looking cannabinoid deficient people run the world. That's why the world's so screwed up. And what we're experiencing right now is a phase change and an evolutionary change. Remember, I told you that cannabinoid levels have always been selected for increased levels. So we now know that, and we're experiencing it by using more. We don't have to wait to evolve more cannabinoids like has always happened. We can do it ourselves because we're smart enough to know that we can use the plant. So what's happening in the United States is you're going to have the backward-looking people adhering to the big pharma model, going to the doctors, wasting their money, getting sick and poisoned, and you're going to have the people who are operating on state-level medical systems going to their dispensaries, and we've already seen it happen now in Colorado and other states where it's legal. A dramatic reduction in Medicare costs, Medicaid costs, because people would rather spend money out of their own pocket and feel better than take free poison.
We've actually been proving that in Canada for quite some time.
Well, this is now an epidemiological experiment because within the next few years, it's going to be completely apparent that the one side does better. We already know, for example, that cannabis users have thinner waists, that they have lower levels of diabetes, that they have lower levels of bladder cancer. We know that it inhibits Alzheimer's. There's going to be so much Alzheimer's in the United States that it's going to bankrupt the healthcare system, which is already bankrupt, but totally by the year 50, they estimated it. Well, who's going to be the ones who get Alzheimer's? The people who are using pharmaceuticals, who are eating the shit diets, the GMOs, and all the other crap. And what you're seeing now, we're in the middle of an evolutionary change. You see, one of the things I haven't talked about today, and this is really, I believe, to be extremely profoundly important science. The metabolism, as I told you, the fat-burning cells have a unique architecture. They close up the genes that burn sugar, and the genes that are burning fat are exposed. You can change the architecture by what's called epigenetics. You modify not the sequence of the DNA, but either the bases or the sugars and other things so that the architecture changes, all right? You acetylate your histones, and that opens them up. You deacetylate the histones, and it closes them up, all right? But when they're open and expressed, that's also when they're more susceptible to genetic change, to DNA damages. A stalled transcription fork will cause strand breaks in the DNA. Strand breaks in the DNA are recombinogenic, and they promote changes and duplications, which is how you wind up evolving genes. So what I'm telling you is that metabolism becomes epigenetics, and then epigenetics becomes genetics. This is totally against everything that everybody in the standard scientific world believes. And I am quite certain that I'm correct.
I think you're correct.
It's targeted mutagenesis for a targeted evolution.
Wow.
Wow is
it's
right.
Very wow.
Wow. They really can't.
You see, so
really
let me give you some examples of what this means, all right? You take a person with breast cancer, and they have a hormone-responsive breast cancer. So what do the doctors do? They give you some anti-estrogen, tamoxifen, or they have newer ones. It doesn't matter. It's the same point. What they're going to do is they're going to block some of the roadways, all right? You're on one side of town, and you want to get to the other side of town. Well, there's the highways, there's the backways, et cetera, okay? And as soon as one area clogs up, the traffic goes someplace else. Well, that's what happens with your biochemical pathways. So when you're in the differentiated mode, when cells are talking with their neighbors and they're working together, even if they're working together bad, they're still talking to one another, okay? And when you have a cancer, they're working together bad, and they're promoting a solution for the cell to survive. Guess what that solution is? Cell division. They're dividing to live. And when you have drug-resistant cancers and you treat them with chemo or radiation, guess what? They grow faster because that's how they're surviving. Instead of just burning and making the free radicals, they're shifting synthesis. So that they're making more. There's always a balance between synthesis and degradation and energy use and energy burning. And if they're not appropriately harmonious, that's when you make too many free radicals. So cells select different roadways. All right, let me back up and give you another story here.
Okay.
All of these different roadways are used at different times. So one of the characteristics of cancer cells is what's called the Warburg effect. Everybody hears that cancer cells like sugar and cancer cells are acidic. Well, they're acidic because they're burning sugar, but they're not burning sugar down to CO2. They only burn them down to make lactic acid, which is acidic, okay? Because by doing that, they're bypassing the electron transport system. They're making energy inefficiently but safely, all right? So I forgot where I was going with this.
Now there's one downfall.
I know where.
That's the one downfall. Memory.
Well, but, that's actually a good thing. Because if you didn't forget, you would be hardwired. If you're hardwired, you don't have creation.
Fair enough.
Stuck.
I get that.
It's anti-life.
There
you have
you
to
go.
learn. You have to remember and forget, because it's only by forgetting that you have creation.
So kids, remember when your dad is telling you fucked up, he's telling you he loves you.
Yeah.
It depends on the dad.
I guess,
Yeah, I suppose.
I guess so, yeah.
You see, I've one of my sons is very normal and linear and remembers and knows everything. My other one is as big of an airhead as I am. And it's only by the grace of God, so to speak, that I survived in the world and succeeded, because I'm such an airhead, I was suspended in 6th grade. And then they skipped me, so I never did the 8th grade. I always felt stupid, though, because people would learn things. People get to learn a song. They'd come back the next day. They'd know songs and poems. I could never do that. Crazy. So anyway, I hope I've given you a lot of stuff to think about.
Certainly have. It's been really mind-bending. Just following along and trying to comprehend everything that you're saying is just... It's been a challenge, but it's been so informative and has led to a lot of deep thought for me. That's for sure.
I've got about 80, almost 90 YouTubes out there that explain all of the basis of what I've talked about in more detail. So you can look at individual
I watched 2 of them
things.
today.
I've watched a few of them over the last little while too.
So where I was going a minute ago is that this Warburg effect that so characterizes all cancers is also part of our normal cell cycle. Because think about it, everything's obvious when you see with clarity. When that yard of DNA has to replicate inside of that little teeny cell, you don't want to expose it to free radicals, because when it's replicating, it's not protected with histones and other proteins. It's not all wrapped up. It's out there naked and exposed to free radicals. So guess what? Cells don't use the electron transport system when they're replicating their DNA. They use aerobic glycolysis, the Warburg effect. So it's a normal part of our cell fluidity. The problem comes when you select for the wrong stuff in the wrong place. Just the same way that you don't want free radicals to be produced when cells are dividing like that. You don't want a virus doesn't want you to produce too many, because then the cell will die, and yet the virus is telling the cell to turn it into a factory for making viruses. So they have to have ways of controlling this free radical production. And it's the same thing. The cells, if you have enough cells that are existing in all of these different states, because they're in different states of replication and other challenges, they're in all of these different adapted states. And now you go and you hit them with chemo. Well, some of those cells will die, and some of those cells will be in a state that allows them to survive. Their metabolic pattern at that time allows them to survive. They have an epigenetic platform that is consistent with their survival. And that epigenetic platform over time will mutate and turn that platform into the future genetics. That's why you see cancer cells. Like if you look at a breast cancer tumor, it's got like 100 different mutations in it. Well, those mutations came because you selected different roadways as you tried to block with tamoxifen. You see, you tried to block that end. So all you're doing with all of these therapies is selecting for drug resistance, the ones that you can't kill. And cannabis kills best, from what I'm gathering, when you have a sugar-burning cell that hasn't been treated with chemo or radiation, and you give it a lot of cannabis, and it forces it into fat burning, and they don't have the machine. They can't do the switch. It's like putting diesel fuel in a gasoline car. It doesn't work, and they die. However, if some of them survive, because they're in a metabolic state that allows for survival, then you got to deal with that. But now they already know how to go back and forth between these different metabolic platforms. And what seems to be working, and it's speculative, but it makes sense, and there's a whole lot behind what I'm saying, but intravenous high doses of vitamin C. Vitamin C in high doses doesn't act as an antioxidant the way it does when you eat a little bit of it, or even if you eat a lot of it. When you inject it into the blood, it interacts with the iron and generates free radicals. So cells like cancer cells or virally infected cells or bacterial cells, infected cells, they have all dealt with different ways of protecting themselves from the excess free radicals that occurred from the perturbation. So you've got to be able to screw that up. And when you add the vitamin C intravenously, when it interacts with the iron and generates all of these free radicals, that causes the drug-resistant cells to overload and kills them.
We're all in the gaze of your listening.
The hell took a bong hit sideways.
Yeah.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What a story. Wow. Holy smokes.
Yeah, I've given you a lot of stuff, you know, but you won't find it in any books anywhere. And if you tell it to doctors, they'll tell you you're crazy. But you know what? Stoners right away know it's true. That's how I knew it was true, you know, as I figured it all out. It's obvious.
It makes sense the way you explain it. It makes sense.
If you take a minute and actually listen to what you're saying, it makes sense. And like Chris said earlier, when I'm listening to it, you know, I'm drifting off. Oh, butterfly. Oh, wait, what is he saying? And you just come right back the way you're going. It's very smooth. I really enjoyed listening to you, sir.
Well, I'm glad it was enjoyable, and hopefully it's some use, and hopefully some of your listeners. You know, I put all this stuff on my Facebook page too, but I'm saturated, and I have to set up a fan page or something. But I'm just, it takes me time to get anything done because I'm so nuts. You know?
Of course.
I feel smarter already. So
please tell people where they can find you, though. Tell people where they can find you, where your website is.
Well, if you go to Facebook, you know, I got a Facebook page. I will set up a fan page so I can mirror things to that. I just am lame. And I've got about, I think it's very close to 90 YouTubes out there. And some of them are extremely, I believe, educational with novel thinking, like the stuff that I've, you know, told you tonight. There's more details on all of that stuff, be it HIV, metabolic plasticity, you know, breast cancer, estrogen receptors, blah, 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 blah. You know, I've got tons of stuff out there because, you know, what I do is as I think about stuff, I put it out there so I can get feedback and so people can utilize it. And, you know, it works. It does work for all of the things.
I think that we could be here all night if we wanted to. getting high and listening to Dr. Bob. But 2 hours has gone by. I wanted to make sure that people know we already did the where they can find you. You just did that, didn't you?
Yep. Did you tape this? I hope.
Oh God, yes. The podcast is ready. It goes out about 10 minutes after we've done it. So,
okay. So if you could send me that link, I'd
absolutely.
like that, and I'll post that on my site.
Oh, we'd appreciate that.
I also have I set up a foundation, a nonprofit foundation, to try and help people like Shona, where the law is fucking sick people.
Yeah, we didn't even get to talk to her about that.
Pardon me?
We didn't even get to that conversation. That'll have to be a whole other conversation.
Well, we can do this again sometime. But there's a lot. What I want to do is I want to go to the World Court and charge the various governments and agencies with crimes against humanity. And I lay out my arguments for that, which is based on all the stuff that we talked about tonight.
Wow. And how is Shauna doing?
She had surgery on Monday. I just spoke with her today. Yesterday, she was looking better and feeling a bit better. A number of people have volunteered to bring her medicine. Hopefully they have. So we'll see. But at least she's feeling better. She has all these adhesions from various surgeries in the past, and the doctors tried to tell her that, she's a hypochondriac. And I mean, you're just dealing with idiots out there. I'm telling you, the medical profession really is criminally insane.
I agree. Totally. 100%. I know more crazy doctors than you can shake a stick at. And ones that just plug their ears and go, nah, when you try to tell them the truth.
It took me 5 years to talk my doctor into signing me for 3 grams. And he just kept, I know nothing about doses. So between conversations with me and other patients slowly started coming in, by the time I actually asked him, I waited a year, and he said, well, you never brought me the papers.
The only thing a doctor has to really know is that there's no lethal dose.
Yeah.
And to verify that, my friend who I told you about with HIV, he also happens to have a Ph.D. in molecular epidemiology. And when he went to South Africa to the HIV conference earlier this year, he didn't take any medicine for 2 weeks. If he doesn't take his medicine, he comes down with kaposi's. He came back from there sick as a dog. He had, I think, 16 kaposi's popping up on his body. This guy is a real piece of work, let me tell you. It's a story, and you can have a show just about him.
No.
But in any event, he took, and this is the second time he's done this, about 50 grams of high concentrated oil orally in one day.
Wow. That's a lot.
He goes into a cannabis coma for a few days and comes back and the kaposi's gone.
Unfortunately, I never gotten over that hump, that get rid of the high and just feel better point, because I don't have enough. It's a constant roller coaster of having some, don't having some.
There's no 50 gram hump, Al.
No, of course not.
No. Well, that's the crime. That's the crimes against humanity right there. That's the whole point. This is an essential nutrient. If we don't consume enough of it, we die younger, and we suffer along the way to a greater degree with all of the age-related illnesses. And this is the condition our government wants us in? Fuck them. That's all I got to say. Fuck them.
On that note,
fuck them for sure.
Dr. Bob, it has been a complete pleasure talking to you, and I hope you'll come back and do it again.
All right, guys. You be well.
We're going to...
Yes, thank you, Doctor.
Say goodbye.
Thank you very much.
I got one Halloween song we're going to listen to before we leave, and then we'll be back next week. I don't know what's going on. Does anybody else? I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Not next week. I got the week after that.
I don't know. We'll figure it out. This is the 420 Radio Show. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Bob, for spending the last couple of hours enlightening us. The podcast.
Thank you for having me.
The podcast will be literally up when I push the button. And we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening.
Have fun, guys. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Peace.
Yep.
This is Bubbles from the trailer park. And they're playing some fucking excellent music on lifestyleradio.ca. I hope I didn't sound too nervous there.
Please hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
I was working in the lab late one night when I heard the gurgle of a water pipe. So I turned to see my monster in a cloud of smoke, who said, "This shit ain't bad. Here, have a toke."
We smoked some hash.
We smoked some monster hash.
Some monster hash.
It was his personal stash.
We smoked some hash.
We got completely trashed.
On monster hash.
We smoked some monster hash as we partied in the castle with the living dead. Mouths were dry and eyes were red. The ghouls and goblins shrieked and screamed. Won't somebody please pass the Visine?
They smoked some hash.
They smoked some monster hash.
Some monster hash.
From Frankie's personal stash.
We smoked some hash.
And they all were smashed.
On monster hash.
They smoked some monster hash. The mummy was toking on a ball. Wolfman said, "Don't bogart that, pass it along." The swamp thing was toasted, rolling on the floor, laughing hysterically and pleading for more. The scene was rocking as the werewolves moved to the undead reggae band's dance hall grooves. Meanwhile in the kitchen, Frankenstein baked some Alice B. Toklas brownies and cakes.
We ate some hash.
We ate some monster hash.
Some monster hash.
It had the graveyard
We
smash.
ate some hash.
And we all got
On
trashed.
monster hash.
We ate some monster hash. The party would have gone on till we all passed out. But just then we heard a blood-curdling shout. "Watch out! Beware! Cover your necks! Dracula's got the munchies and he's totally wrecked."
He smoked some hash.
He smoked some monster hash.
Some monster hash.
He was completely
He
smashed.
smoked some hash.
That Transylvanian's
On
trash.
monster hash.
He smoked some monster hash. Now every night the dead rise up from the grave to partake in a happening THC rave. For you, the living, this hash was meant to. When you get to my door, just say the toys sent you.
We smoked some hash.
We'll smoke some monster
Some
hash.
monster hash.
And we'll all get
We
trashed
smoked some hash.
from my personal
On
stash.
monster hash.
We'll smoke some monster hash. Hash. Easy boy, save some for daddy. This is good.
Tune into the Pace Radio Show and catch Kim Cooper, Debbie Stoll-Skiffin, or Allison Murden, along with myself, Al Grant, as we talk to Canadian and international cannabis advocates who are working hard to help patients and to end cannabis prohibition. Catch us live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at lifestyleradio.ca.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
You like music, you like weed, well, we gonna be good friends indeed. This is how much I like more than smoking trees. They'll make you dance the do-si-do and teach you how the chiba grows. Smoke a bowl on the 420 radio show. On Lifestyle Radio.
So what are you doing? Nothing. Why not?
Are you looking for non-stop, continuous cannabis and psychedelic programming? If you are, then turn your browsers to 420radio.ca or paceradio.net, where you will find the 420 Pace re-rolled Saturday. Everything gets started at 8 a.m. Eastern Saturday morning.
Hi, I'm Timmy.
And I'm Mary Jane. He's the newbie.
She's the doobie. And this is the show
where we
tote
cannabis.
Talk.
From both sides.
Is that even possible?
Stay tuned. We'll be back after